The cold night air wrapped around the city like a thick blanket, the streets illuminated by the soft glow of flickering streetlights. The world moved fast, cars speeding by, people walking with purpose, all lost in their own lives. Among them was a young girl, no older than 15, her small frame wrapped in an oversized hoodie, her eyes darting around anxiously. She stood near a bustling intersection, watching as strangers passed her without a second glance. She had been wandering for hours, her phone battery long dead, the streets unfamiliar. Every corner she turned seemed to lead her further into confusion. She wasn't from this part of the city. She had only come for an errand earlier that day. But somehow she had taken the wrong turn, and now she had no way of getting home. Her stomach ached from hunger, and her feet felt sore from walking. That was when she saw him. A man stepping out of a gleaming black car, his suit pristine, his wristwatch reflecting the streetlights like a diamond. He was clearly wealthy. His presence demanded attention, the way he carried himself exuding confidence and power. People moved out of his way without him asking, and he barely acknowledged anyone around him. For a moment, she hesitated. Approaching a stranger wasn't something she would normally do, especially someone like him. He looked important, busy, but she had no choice. She needed help. Summoning her courage, she stepped forward. "Excuse me, sir." Her voice was small, uncertain. The man barely glanced at her, his fingers adjusting the cuff of his expensive coat. She tried again. "Sir, please, I just need help finding my way home. I got lost and my phone is dead. If you could just—" He cut her off with a single dismissive wave of his hand. "I don't have time for this." Her heart sank. I just need to use your phone. Or if you could just tell me how to get tow." His gaze turned sharp, impatient. "I said I don't have time." And just like that, he walked away, stepping into the grand hotel behind him without another word. The door shut, sealing him inside his world of luxury, far away from her small, desperate existence. She stood there for a long time, her hands trembling, her throat tight with unshed tears. It wasn't just his rejection that hurt. It was the way he hadn't even looked at her properly, as if she wasn't worth a second of his time. With no other choice, she turned and kept walking. What she didn't know was that this moment, this brief, seemingly unimportant interaction, was about to set off a chain of events that neither of them could have ever imagined. Because the next day, everything changed. The next morning, the city woke up to the usual rhythm of life. Cars honking, people rushing to work, coffee shops filling up. But for the millionaire, Alexander Graves, it was just another day of meetings, investments, and power moves. He barely remembered the girl from the night before. To him, she had been just another stranger looking for help, one of many who approached him, expecting something. He had long stopped entertaining such encounters. As he sipped his morning espresso in the glass-walled office of his high-rise building, his assistant entered with a hesitant expression. "Sir, there's something on the news you might want to see." Alexander barely glanced up. "Unless it's about the stock market, I don't care." She shifted uncomfortably. "It's about a missing girl." He looked up now, curious but still uninterested. "And why would that concern me?" His assistant hesitated before placing a tablet in front of him. The news headline made him pause. "Young girl reported missing after failing to return home last night. Last seen near Grand Avenue." His fingers tightened around his cup. Grand Avenue. That was where his hotel was, where he had seen her. He clicked on the news link. A grainy image showed the girl's face, a school photo, her wide eyes filled with innocence, a hopeful smile playing on her lips. For some reason, he felt an unfamiliar unease settle in his chest. It wasn't guilt, he told himself. It couldn't be. He hadn't done anything wrong. She had asked for help, he had refused. That was all. But the thought wouldn't leave him. Meanwhile, across the city, a woman paced her tiny living room, clutching her phone, her eyes red from crying. The girl's mother had spent the entire night searching, calling friends, knocking on doors. No one had seen her daughter since yesterday. The police had been notified, but with no immediate leads, the search was slow. The mother's mind raced. Her daughter was responsible, careful. She wouldn't just disappear. Something must have happened, and every passing hour filled her with more dread. Elsewhere, in a different part of the city, a man sat on the edge of his seat in a dimly lit room, staring at the girl's picture on the news. He tapped his fingers against the table, his mind calculating. He had seen that girl before, briefly when she had wandered near the alleyway outside his store looking lost. She had looked frightened, vulnerable, and now she was missing. Alexander tried to push the story out of his mind, but it followed him like a shadow. Throughout the day, he caught himself glancing at his phone, checking for updates. No new developments, just the same desperate plea from the mother. If anyone has seen my daughter, please help. By the time evening fell, he couldn't ignore the feeling gnawing at him anymore. He called his driver. "Take me to Grand Avenue." As the car pulled up to the street where he had last seen her, he stepped out, looking around. The city felt different now. The same neon lights, the same crowds, but now it was like he was seeing everything through a different lens. Had she walked down this way? Had someone followed her? Had she cried for help after he turned his back? Guilt crept in, unwanted but persistent. Just then, he noticed a small diner on the corner. He walked in, scanning the few customers inside. An older man behind the counter looked up as Alexander approached. "Excuse me," Alexander said. "I'm looking for a girl. About 15. She was here last night, near this street." The man's face shifted into something unreadable. He wiped his hands on a towel and leaned in slightly. "You're not the first person asking about her." Alexander's pulse quickened. Who else was looking for her? The man hesitated, glancing toward the back door of the diner. A guy came in earlier, asked about the same girl. Didn't look like family. Looked more like trouble. Alexander's stomach turned. Did he say anything? The man shook his head, just left in a hurry. Alexander didn't know why, but a sense of urgency gripped him. This wasn't just a case of a lost girl anymore. Something else was happening. And for the first time in his life, he realized he couldn't just ignore it. Because the next moment, his phone buzzed. A news alert flashed on the screen. Breaking. New surveillance footage shows missing girl being followed by unknown man before vanishing. And just like that, Alexander knew he had to find her. Before it was too late. Alexander's heart pounded as he stared at his phone screen. The surveillance footage showed the girl, her small frame visible under the dim streetlights, walking alone. A few seconds later, a man appeared behind her. He kept his distance at first, but then his pace quickened. In the next frame, both of them disappeared into a side street. That was the last anyone had seen of her. A cold dread settled in Alexander's chest. He had been right there. If he had just listened, just taken a moment to help, she wouldn't have ended up in this situation. He gritted his teeth and turned back to the diner owner. "That man you saw earlier, did he say anything else? Did he mention where he was going?" The older man thought for a moment before nodding. He kept asking about an abandoned lot a few blocks from here. Said he saw the girl heading that way. That was all Alexander needed to hear. Without another word, he rushed out, his driver calling after him. But he didn't stop. He wasn't even thinking anymore. His feet just moved, his body driven by something stronger than logic. The lot was dark and empty, surrounded by rusted fences and broken glass. A single street lamp flickered, casting long shadows across the ground. Alexander's breath came fast as he stepped inside, his eyes scanning the area. Then he heard it. A faint sound, a muffled cry. His chest tightened. "Hello," he called out. No response. He moved toward an old storage shed at the back of the lot. The door was slightly open. Carefully, he pushed it wider, and the dim light from outside spilled in. There in the corner, huddled against the wall, was the girl. Her face was pale, her clothes slightly dirty, but she was alive. Her eyes widened in fear as she saw him. "It's okay," Alexander said, his voice softer now. "I'm here to help." She hesitated but didn't move. He realized she had no reason to trust him. After all, the last time she asked for help, he had walked away. He took a step back. "I know I ignored you last night, and I was wrong. But I promise I won't leave you again." Tears welled in her eyes. Slowly, she got to her feet. Before she could speak, footsteps sounded from behind. Alexander turned just in time to see a figure emerging from the darkness. A man, his expression twisted in frustration at being interrupted. Alexander's instincts kicked in. He positioned himself between the girl and the man. "Walk away," he warned. His voice was steady, controlled. The man hesitated, sizing him up. But Alexander wasn't just any businessman. He was powerful in more ways than one. His presence, his wealth, his influence, it made people think twice. A long moment passed, then the man scowled and backed away, disappearing into the night. Alexander turned back to the girl. "Come on, let's get you home." She didn't let go of his hand the entire way back. By the time they reached the police station, her mother was already there, her face filled with worry. The moment she saw her daughter, she broke into sobs, running forward and pulling her into a tight embrace. Alexander stood back, watching the reunion, something unfamiliar stirring inside him. He had spent his whole life chasing success, money, status. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, he felt something real, something meaningful. As he turned to leave, the girl called out, "Wait." He stopped. She took a step forward, her voice soft but clear. "Thank you." And in that moment, Alexander Graves, the millionaire who never had time for anyone, realized something. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness could change everything. And this time, he had chosen not to walk away.